Hello everyone, Kaoz here, and welcome to another old school RuneScape video. If you had a friend who was about to make a brand new account, where would you tell them to start? Would it be scaling, combat and slayer right away, questing? The possibilities are not endless, but even for experienced players, this game could feel a little overwhelming at times. That is why today we are going over an overall efficient path to build a RuneScape account and get started on what you like doing the most ASAP. Boys and girls, if this video is useful, make sure to subscribe to the channel for upcoming bangers and drop a like for the relentless algorithm. If you have any questions regarding account progression, join our Discord with a link in the description. I only have two disclaimers for this video. This is my personal path from a brand new account to the early, mid, late, and even the end game of old school RuneScape, and what I would do if I had to start another account from scratch. Also, I won't be talking too much about money making and gear, because that's what my gear progression guide will be all about. If you disagree with any of these points, make sure to let me know in the comments below. So boys and girls, let me take you by the hand on how to become an OSRS champion, and let's begin. Okay, so going back to the initial question, what would you say is the general progression order one should follow to get to most of the high-level achievements in this game? Whenever people ask this on stream, I always say you should follow a seemingly simple path of Questcape, Diary Cape, and Maxcape. To a lot of you, there are still a ton of unanswered questions like, when should I get a fire cape? When do I start worrying about money? What should my gear setup look like after a few stages of the account? When do I start focusing on combat achievements? And the list goes on. Of course, my initial path is a quick 1, 2, 3 of what to do if I wanted to max another account. But we need to sprinkle a lot of other smaller achievements in between. And before we get into that, I will tell you a very quick story for this progression to make sense. When I quit RuneScape back in 2012, I had been playing the game for around 7 years and I never achieved a quest cape because it just seemed too tedious with no huge benefits behind it. When I started old school RuneScape back in mid-2018, I knew right off the bat that I wanted to max my account, but I said to myself that I wouldn't do anything major until I got myself a quest cape. The reason for this is that I didn't want questing to stunt my scaling grinds, so I spent about 2 months fully focusing on the quest cape grind. To a lot of you, this is going to sound like a lot of time, but remember, we didn't have the Quest Helper plugin back then. After the quest cape, I got all the levels required for an achievement diary cape, and finally, I made a list of skills to get to 99 until I achieved the coveted max cape. With more experience and more content than ever before, we now have more things to cover on our way to completion, so let's see a comprehensive list of things to do at each stage of your account. So we are going to start with the basics, and whether you have a fresh account or you are using an old one without too much progress, I am going to give you 2 things that are going to single-handedly carry the progress of your account. Go to the OSRS wiki and look for a section called Optimal Quest Guide. Especially for accounts straight off Tutorial Island, this is a list of quests in the most efficient path possible, which will give you a ton of early game experience to skip a ton of boring grinds. I have been following this list on my hardcore, and honestly, it is a game changer. I also want you to download and activate the very popular RuneLite plugin called Quest Helper. Fair warning, if you are a brand new player and you like story-driven adventures, this plugin is a double-edged sword because it will tell you what to do, where to go, who to talk to, what to say, and it will literally take every single bit of immersion out of the equation. However, you will remember important places, NPCs, and things you need to revisit in the future, so not all is lost. I went over just a few of these quests in the previous video, showing all the levels you can skip with just a few minutes of dialogue and running around the map like the Night Sword, the Waterfall quest, the Tourist Trap, and many more which will jumpstart your account. Back when I was on my way to the Questscape, the Quest Helper plugin did not exist. So I ordered these quests by difficulty and got all of the levels required for quests in that category, so I wouldn't need to stop the flow. The Optimal Quest Guide also takes Ironmen and Iron Women into account. Now, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Our last topic made it seem like we are going through quests from start to finish, but before you finish quests in, let's say, the medium difficulty, I recommend going out of your way to do the easy achievement diaries. I would say the most common one to get early on is the Arty achievement diary, because the Arty Cloak 1 offers unlimited teleports to the Arty Monastery, meaning that even if you're a main account, you will get a free prayer refill after you teleport here. And for Ironman, it is essential to get it to a fairy ring quickly. But let's not focus on a single item. The Kandarin headgear acts as an unextinguishable light source. When wearing the Karamja Gloves 1, you will get better deals at Karamja shops. The Radha's Blessing has a prayer bonus of 1 and it teleports you to the current woodland. And the Explorer's Ring 1 provides 2 50% run energy replenishes per day, just to mention a few. Not only will you do a few basic level quests to chip away at that quest cape, but some passive effects from the Easy Diary are pretty good for the state of your account at this point. And lamps you get from it can get a decent boost if you still need a few levels for upcoming adventures. And speaking of quests, we have a particularly important milestone that will pretty much define the beginning of the mid-game in my personal opinion. Enter the Bearer's Gloves. As most of you know, this iconic pair of gloves is obtained after fully completing the quest A Recipe for Disaster. Back then, this adventure pretty much shook most of us to our core, but nowadays this is something people can speedrun in just a few days of gameplay, and it will be a staple item in your setup for a long time. In order to finish this adventure, you need a lot of other quests with fairly high requirements, but nothing you can't handle with a mid-level account. Back in 2018 I got mine at just a level 64 combat, so I'm sure you can do it too. The Bearer's Gloves are the second best in slot gloves in the game, only behind the Ferocious Gloves for melee, the Zerite Van Braces for ranged, and the Tormented Bracelet for magic. After Recipe for Disaster, I would recommend going on a detour that might take a few hours, but it's going to be well worth it. At this point, it would be a great idea to start focusing on combat achievements. A recent change to this aspect of the game made it so you can achieve tier rewards with points, rather than needing to complete every single task in a category. And for now, I recommend the easy and even the medium tier of combat achievements. Although, if you don't like this one, you can leave it for later, for another step. Most notable from these tiers are more Warrior Guild tokens for the eventual Dragon Defender grind, and more points from pest control games. But we will revisit to this point later. It might not sound like a lot, but we are working towards hard and elite along the way, because those benefits are actually massive. Along the easy and possibly medium combat achievements, we are now going for the medium achievement diaries. These are obviously not as quick as the easy tier, but you will already have a ton of these from exploring around Galenor after achieving the Bearer's Gloves. So we are just finishing off some of the tasks that were a little bit out of the way. Other than experience lamps and items, some key benefits include more runes from the ZMI altar, more marks of grace at the Seer's rooftop, access to the Shiloh village gem mine, buying battle staves from Saf, and much more. And speaking of combat, you can do a little bit of questing to level up your melee, ranged, and magic stats further to take on tougher quest bosses, but we are going to utilize them to take on one of the most iconic challenges in the game. Anywhere between the Bearer's Gloves and the Quest Cape, I highly recommend you take on TZ Tok Jad by beating all 63 waves in the Fight Caves. I'm sure the Fire Cape needs no introduction. It is the second best in slot cape in the game, and will be part of your gear for a long time, since the Inferno is just a little bit out of reach for us at this point. But no need to overthink it. If you've watched my Fire Cape guide, I would say you can definitely get the gear and items needed in order to take on the challenge at this point. So it would be a good idea to challenge yourself to get one of these bad boys. With a Fire Cape on your bank, it is definitely the time to set out to finish the Quest Cape grind. You should be powerful enough to take on all the quest bosses, and go to the Wise Salt Man in Draenor to claim the Quest Cape, which also works as the best to teleport near a fairy ring. From here on out, it will be pretty easy to do both hard diaries and combat achievements. The reason for this is that the Quest Cape gives you an extremely balanced account build in terms of levels, and you won't be stopped by any quest requirements anymore, a lot of which are still needed for the hard and elite tier of achievement diaries. This is also super useful because with all quests done, you have access to many bosses which will give you a ton of combat achievement points by just fighting them casually. The KC tasks might take a little bit longer, but they are guaranteed and you won't really need to rely on RNG to get them, such as speed tasks. Notable rewards from this tier of diaries include increased coin pouch limit from pickpocketing and higher chance of set activity, infinite ropes for the Calphite Queen lair, 10% increased chance of bolt effects and a 10% extra yield from Caterby Patch, the Ash Sanctifier and the Bone Crusher, and the Varrock Armor 3 for mining, just to mention a few. From the hard combat achievements, you get higher chances at hard clues, even more points from pest control games, less KC to enter the God Wars dungeon boss rooms, and my favorite in this tier, a maximum of 60 cannonballs for your dwarf multi-cannon. This is where we get our first fork on the road, and you can go either the skilling route or the PVM route. I will mention the latter first because I want to focus on how I did it, which was the scaling route, but just to give you an idea of what I would do if I was more of a PVM enthusiast. At this point, you would want to do a little bit of raiding. Start with entry TOA, normal TOA, chambers, and the TOB last. I'm not saying do these until you greenlog items and combat achievements, but definitely get a feel for all of these encounters and focus on them once you have max combat and competitive gear. Afterwards, I would personally go for an Infernal Cape and Quiver to then focus on raids, bossing, and money making full time to fund the max and grind, and sprinkle combat achievements in between to work towards Grandmaster. Finally, follow the steps we will cover next. So because we are going a little bit more in depth on the scaling route, after the hard combat achievements I would fully focus on getting the Achievement Diary Cape. For this you need around base 90s, and some of the highest requirements are levels like 96 fishing, 94 magic, 91 smithing, 90 woodcutting, and so on. A ton of these can be boosted, so don't worry too much. The Elite Diary is absolutely stacked with insane passive effects, and this time around almost all the items you get from them will be incredibly useful for teleports and built-in effects. Vikander headgear, Karamja gloves, Artie cloak, Varrock armor, Fremetic boots, and the Explorer's ring, just to mention a few, will definitely need a home in your bank for repeated use. A very obvious step coming up is a trimmed music cape. To get it, you need both an Achievement Diary Cape and every single music track in the game, including holiday tracks for which you will need to wait an entire year to unlock. I would personally say that a trimmed music cape could be seen as a pseudo-completionist cape in terms of lore, because to wear it you need an Achievement Diary Cape, for which you need a quest cape. So once you have these 3 capes, you can pretty much say that you are done with lore content in old school RuneScape. We don't have much to do other than maxing, so if you want to do something fun before locking yourself to the quest for that coveted max cape, I would suggest going for the elite tier of combat achievements, because at this point you will be more than capable of doing different bosses in the game for easy points to bring you up to that threshold. If you're a fan of the scaling grind, this is where I would personally start the race to all 99s, leaving combat after this intense goal. If and when you get your max cape, it is time to start your PVM journey with a bang. What I did right after maxing was going straight into the Inferno, and I didn't leave until I got my very first Infernal Cape. Nowadays you might want to go for the Colosseum right away and get the newest best in slot ranged cape in the game, the Dishonest Quiver. Both Tiskal Zuk and the Soul Heredit will be incredibly challenging foes, and if you have what it takes to beat them both, only a few encounters in the game are more difficult than these two. This will give you a massive boost in confidence for the road ahead of you. At this point it would be a good idea to do a final round of long-term money making, because if you want to go for the Master and Grandmaster combat achievements, you are definitely going to need some more powerful toys at your disposal. Do as many different bosses and raids as possible to chip away at both of these Elite and Grandmaster tiers, and when you have a Scythe of Vitur, a Twisted Bow, and or a Tunic in Shadow, you will only need a few niche items to start the push to that incredibly prestigious Tiskal Slayer helmet. Of course, this final step is a lot easier said than done, because in order to master raids up to Grandmaster level, you will need an insane amount of dedication, deep understanding of the game, and of course patience. Once you have a trimmed music cape, a max cape, and a Grandmaster Slayer helmet, you can pretty much say you have beaten old school RuneScape. If you want a final thing to do in this 2007 version of a 2001 point-and-click medieval fantasy browser game for children, is that you can of course go for pets and collection logs. Pet hunting is one of my favorite things to do in the game despite looking a little boring, but you are chasing that ever so tiny chance at getting a miniature version of a boss following you around, until you get your next pet drop, and leave the previous one in the POH. As of the time of making this video, and probably for many years to come, not a single person has ever filled the collection log. So old school RuneScape will be one of the best games in terms of replay value, granting tens of thousands of hours to feel like you have truly beaten the game. Oh, and of course, if you have deeply rooted psychiatric problems, you can go for 200 mil experience in all skills, but I don't recommend you even thinking about it for the sake of your mental and physical health. Boys and girls, that's pretty much it for this video. Thank you so much for coming and for making it this far. If you did, write a comment below telling me what the most crucial part of an account is and why. Include the term RSN in your comment along your username, and we will pick a winner on Friday's stream. I want to give a massive thank you to all the people you see on screen who have decided to monetarily support this project, which helps me continue feeding my family with beans and tortillas. If you want to be part of this list of legends, click the join button below and see all the cool benefits you can get in the channel and in the Discord out of your monetary subscription. In the next one, I have another banger for you guys as we get closer and closer to my biggest upload of the year, the 2024 Gear Progression Guide. For now, I hope you have an amazing day, have an amazing week, and I will see you then. Peace.